In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King, and tonight I'd like to start with our Black History reflection before introducing our guests. Our Black History reflection is about Roy Clay Sr. Roy Clay Sr. stands as one of the most consequential yet under-recognized innovators in American history, a man whose brilliance helped shape the technological world we now take for granted. Born in 1929 in segregated Missouri, Clay grew up in a society determined to limit his possibilities, but he refused to inherit those limitations. He became a mathematician, a programmer, and ultimately one of the founding architects of Silicon Valley. At Hewlett-Packard, Clay led the team that developed the HP 2116A, one of the earliest mini computers ever produced. His leadership helped launch HP's computer division, laying the groundwork for the modern tech industry. Clay later founded RODL Electronics, designing electrical safety testing systems used by every major U.S. tech manufacturer. A quiet empire built on precision, innovation, and uncompromising excellence. Perhaps his greatest legacy is what he modeled, that Black brilliance is not accidental, it is foundational. That Black leadership is not peripheral, it is structural. That when we build institutions, we build futures. Tonight, as we speak with a leader shaping municipal systems, community outcomes, and future of local governance, we honor Roy Clay Sr., a man who proved that when Black excellence is institutionalized, it becomes unstoppable. Now, let me introduce our guest for tonight. Family, tonight we step into a conversation about leadership, not the kind that seeks attention, but the kind that builds systems, strengthens communities, and ensures that everyday people feel the impact of good governance. This is America in Black and White, where we examine the structures that shape our lives and the leaders who are bold enough to prove them. Local government is where democracy becomes real. It's where policy meets pavement, where budgets become services, and where leadership becomes lived experience. And tonight's guest is a man who understands that better than most. Derrick C. Turner, Assistant City Manager for the city of Tucker, Georgia, is a strategist, a systems builder, and a public servant whose work is rooted in transparency, accountability, and community trust. From Fulton County to Lawrenceville to Franklin County, he has built a career defined by operational excellence and measurable results. He has secured distinguished budget awards, led process improvements, advised municipalities, and helped align government operations with the needs and values of the people they serve. Tonight, we explore his journey, his philosophy, and the work required to build communities that thrive not by accident, but by design. Welcome to episode 54. Welcome to the conversation. and welcome Derrick C. Turner to the show. Hello, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I am just excellent. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
Oh, there's no complaints from me. I'm doing very well. Glad to see you again.
Sir, welcome back. Is
Absolutely.
there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we get into the show?
Yeah, just glad to be back. I mean, a wonderful podcast to be a part of and be associated to, and I really hope that through conversations like these, we're really able to produce leaders. We're really able to just promote local governance. It's such an important thing that people are a little bit afraid of nowadays with the political climate. But something that I think is just super important because it is where rubber meets the road. It's where everything starts and ends. It's your school boards, it's your local government. They're the ones that really control a lot of these things. And if you disregard those, then you never know who's going to step into those. So I think for everyone out in the audience, why not you?
There you go. I definitely appreciate that. And as I get into the show, what I like to do is I want to start with, having people to get the opportunity to get to learn a little bit more about who Derrick was before you became the person that you are now.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us who was Derrick before the titles, the leadership roles, and the public recognition?
I was just a shy little boy from West Tennessee, from Martin, Tennessee, that grew up in an agricultural community. When I left being in West Tennessee, going to college in Tennessee State, I think that's really where I was able to blossom. Shout out to all the HBCUs out there. And I think that was just an opportunity for me to really step into my first roles in leadership, being at Tennessee State, being student manager for the cafeteria. It was one of those opportunities that led me down the path to my career and has really shaped a lot of who I am now. But I'm always still that country boy at heart. And just look back on those times. It was a different day and age, but you just roll with the times and you continue to grow.
What early experiences shaped your understanding of service and community?
Yeah, I think a lot of that started with the church, to be honest with you. So growing up in the church, and I know a lot of us grew up in the church and going, and your parents and grandparents make you go, but eventually to where I started playing piano for my church there in West Tennessee, and that's a gift of love because it wasn't a paid gig for those many years. It's one of those to where you're doing this to really be able to help others. And I think that's where it first started, is learning that is that, you're not always doing things for your own gain or for your own benefit. You're doing things to try to help others in as many ways as you possibly can. So I think that was my first experience.
So, growing up, what did leadership look like in your household or neighborhood?
Yeah, so definitely household. My dad was the boss. He was the bosses of bosses. So he was also a manager. So he finished his career as a plant manager for Goodyear. But he was definitely the person in charge. He had 9 brothers and sisters, and even though he was not the oldest, he was the boss. So starting with him, being able to learn how to lead in that way. I mean, I don't think I learned to lead and say it the same kind of way. He was a little more iron fisted in between me and my brothers and the rest of the family, but at least understanding how do you lead, whenever people are looking to you, though you have to answer the call. And I think that was the big thing I learned from dad.
When you think about those at that time, I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but I know that when I was coming up as a young kid, the neighborhood actually raised the kids. And
Yeah.
so, with that kind of rearing, with that kind of community development, with that
Mhm.
kind of community, unity, was that something that was instilled in you that you learned from that helped you develop to become the great leader that you are?
I think so. And I think even for my age, I'm not quite old. I'm still under 50, just barely under 50. But but even with that, it's one of those where yeah, the community really did help you to grow. So whether it be your neighborhood and people looking out for whatever you're doing in your own neighborhood, or just sort of that that sort of church group, the people that you're around, or the school group, the parents of all the other kids. I think everybody really looked out for one another and just tried to make sure that, if I see Derrick's doing something wrong, not only am I going to handle it, but I'm also going to call your parents, and they're going to probably handle it on top of me too. So, it was a little bit of a different time, to where there was more community involvement. You knew your neighbors versus, I think nowadays it's a little bit of a rush. You see people pull into their driveways, open up their garage, and it's almost like they're speeding to get into the garage to let the garage down, because they don't want to have to, wave hi to somebody, or they don't want to have to speak to somebody, and I do try to develop some sense of community even within my neighborhood, just by, while it's good weather, walking, speaking to people when I'm out, try to get to know a few people. But yeah, back in the day, absolutely, there was no such thing as you didn't wave to somebody you passed by, and that's how connected you were.
So, what was some of the things that you could take away from that time to give you your sense of community?
Yeah, I think for back in that time, it was really about looking to the elders. At that time frame, you had that certain set of elders. They were the people that were going to speak. My job was not to speak, and being and being in that type of community and you growing up, I think that's an important asset to learn. Is sometimes we are a little bit too quick to speak and we don't want to listen, but when you're in that type of community and you are pulling back and you're just listening, you're going to learn so much just from sitting listening to somebody else, because at that point you're talking about elders that are 60, 70, 80, that are speaking on their experience, and being in your teens and whatnot. They've already lived a whole life, so being able to listen to what they're saying, and granted, at those ages you listen to older people and you're like, oh, whatever, I'm young and you're old and this, that, but you do still look back on those things, and as you do come up, you get those small realizations as you go through life experiences that say, wow, they were actually right about what they were talking about. And I think that's really how you build community in those situations, and how you get that sense of community is everybody really being in it together. All those different age ranges bring different levels of experience, different levels of wisdom and knowledge, that no matter what age you are, you can still pick up from that. Older people today can pick up from the knowledge of how do I use electronics, different types of electronics, and younger people can pick up on the knowledge of what was it like back in the day. And even being in those mid ranges, you're still getting the best of both of those worlds. So you're still experiencing some of the younger things, but you are beginning to be in that aging community to where, you need to know what to expect. So you can still look to those elders. And that's how you build that community, is you have all age ranges that are all together, that are interacting. And I think for me, that was a big sense of community, is being able to be around all the different age ranges, and just getting a chance to learn and discuss.
When did you first realize you were drawn to public service?
I think for me, really, I think it was probably midway through my working career. So getting to the mid 2010s, was when I realized that I really wanted to be in that. With my mom being a school teacher, she, for her career for 27 years, of course, she was in public service, and I really wanted to venture into that and just try to see if that was something that posed a little bit more interest to me, and being able to serve. And you want to be able to go home at the end of the day and really feel like you've contributed and that you've done everything you can for your relative community, whether it be the community you work for, the community you live in. And I know that everybody does still get some level of reward from whatever type of work they may do. But I wanted a little bit more, and something a little bit more personal, that I could, physically reach out and touch someone, and you see immediately how you've helped somebody when you're in public service.
Who were the mentors who helped shape your path?
Yeah, I think there's a few of them out there. I think especially as I came up in the private sector, I had a boss that really allowed me to grow. And I think the probably similarity between all those bosses I've had that have helped me to really grow into what I am is they're not micromanagers. They're people that see the potential in you, in me in this case, and they really allow me to use the skills that I have to be creative. They don't put limits on what I can do. You're not limited in those cases by title. I think a great mentor that I had being at the city of Lawrenceville, Keith Lee and Steve North, were great for me there, especially, and that really helped to launch me to where I'm at today. Is, I wasn't limited by title. I was able to really do a variety of different things within the organization that, probably anybody else, they wouldn't have necessarily let them do that volume of things because they're not in your job description, is what a lot of people will say. But, if I had ideas, they were very willing to entertain those ideas and let me see them through to bring them to city management and bring them to fruition.
So, what values from your upbringing still guide your work today?
Yeah, I think being honest, your integrity. I think the value of hard work. Both of my parents grew up on farms, so I think especially that because you had to get up and earn what you ate back in that day. But I think those are just a few of the core values that I've carried with me always, because you want to be as honest, as caring as you can be, empathetic to your employees, because everybody's going through something, and you don't want to just simply judge things by the rules only. There's going to be scenarios where if you know your people and you talk to your people, when somebody's kind of having an off day, to pull them to the side. And I tell my staff even now, I can look at you and tell when you're having an off day. I don't even need to hear you talk. And I think those things are important to really be relatable and personable with your staff, just so that everybody can get along, number one, but we can get the best out of each other in the workplace. But I think those are some of the core values.
So, as you mentioned that you went to an HBCU.
Yeah.
Tell us, what was your life experience like growing up on the campus at Tennessee State University?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing for me was a little bit of culture shock, because growing up in West Tennessee, in rural West Tennessee, it definitely was not a lot of people that looked like me. So going from that to going to Tennessee State, being an HBCU, a culture shock, but it was a great thing though, because it was just a different viewpoint that I was able to get. And it was something that, just being in that type of environment, being on campus, even if I walk on campus today, even, getting to a certain amount of years later, I won't say how many years, but it gets to where, you think you just walk on campus and you can just feel the electricity always. So, it's one of those things that you feel whenever the campuses and everything were founded, you can understand why there was that need for an HBCU at that time and why there's still a need for HBCUs today.
So, how did your time at Tennessee State influence your worldview?
Yeah, I think it gave me a really well-rounded view. Again, being from rural West Tennessee was one perspective, and then coming to Tennessee State was a totally different perspective. And I think as I, matriculated through school and graduated, then it just gave me this viewpoint of there's so many differences in our world. I think it made me more accepting and able to really move through our world much easier, just because I had those two vastly different perspectives. But I think both aspects were very good for me. I couldn't complain about either one of them in any way. But just one of those to where when I left TSU, that it just gave me that sense of pride of knowing, you have a home to come back to, was a big thing. But also too, just knowing what TSU can do for everybody and what it has done for a lot of people in the past. I was fortunate to have an aunt and an uncle that actually attended and graduated from TSU, as well. So, it wasn't something that was foreign to me. And even for where I grew up, TSU came to play against my hometown college every year. So it was something that I had a relationship with for many, many years before even attending. TSU was kind of the place I knew I wanted to go, just from being around those type of interactions, even those one times a year, seeing them come play, the band, everything like that. That TSU was the only school I even applied to.
Oh, wow. Um, what personal challenges strengthen your resilience?
I think really being able to understand how I need to be a person that really dictates my own life. I think those challenges of growing up in the rural area, it is very challenging sometimes in some areas, and there's things that are still out there, even growing up at that time that you don't want to have to deal with. But I think it makes you just that much tougher. It really shapes your future and makes you understand how you need to really move throughout your life and really make sure that you're okay. I think flipping that to then going to a Tennessee State and how that then really shapes your future is you understand the importance of connection, how you need to get along with people, how you need to build connections with other people because you can't get through this life just simply on your own. You have to have some connections on some level to be able to get through life, and I think taking those lessons from growing up to then being at TSU to being in the workforce, then I think that's one of my stronger attributes is being able to build connections with others, to where I know I can call on other cities, they'll help me out. I have those relationships, and I think that's been something that really shaped how I view working in the world.
I think, and just help us understand this a little bit better. Is in just understanding not just as you speak of your story, but in thinking about in going to Tennessee State University, which helped to expand your view of being so multifaceted, but it transcended so well, which we'll talk a little bit later about, but it transcended so well over into what you do as a city manager. Can you tell us how did that help you to be able to transition as to lead people that have to work with you to do all of those great things that you're doing now?
Yeah, I think for being at Tennessee State, then again, just the opportunities that were presented for me within my time at TSU. Like I said, starting with being the student manager within the cafeteria. Even though it's not the most glamorous job in the world, it's one of those to where you're dealing with all the students, and just that variety of people. So you have your seniors, you have your juniors, your sophomores, your freshmen. So you're dealing with just all the levels within the school of everybody that's attending, that's on a meal plan, or just simply coming to eat. And I think when you take some of those type of experiences, it really just helps you build those levels of how you're able to interact with different mindsets. It might not be necessarily all different types of people, but it's going to be different mindsets because when you're a freshman and you're 18, you're there to conquer the world. You don't know any better. Nobody's told you yet that you can't do all these things, so you still believe you can still be Superman or Superwoman, versus that senior that has realized I need to narrow my focus. I need to think about what I want to do next year because I'm going to be out of school. I'm going to be working. And I think additionally with being at Tennessee State, and that I was fortunate to be one of the founding members of our chapter of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, which then added another layer of being able to deal with people. So not only being in the cafeteria and managing that to be able to deal with the different school levels, now I'm dealing with different Greek organizations and having to manage through those situations. And I think it was just a great growing opportunity while I was there to be able to have those two different type of scenarios to where I now interact with just practically everybody on campus, whether it be in the cafeteria dealing with students primarily, or dealing with an organization, dealing with other Greeks, and dealing with school leadership in that case. So you have to really be able to navigate dealing with just a lot of different personalities, and that I think was a big key for me when I left Tennessee State that I learned.
So, what was the moment you knew government work was your calling?
Yeah, I think really, even though I was at Fulton County prior, I think when I got to the city of Lawrenceville, I think when I saw the opportunities that were out there, and I felt really comfortable. So probably within my first year being there, so getting into 2017, 2018, then I really saw that I felt like I was good at it. And I felt like whenever I have sort of that opportunity to just use my brain and just use the skills I have, and I wasn't being micromanaged, and they gave me all these opportunities, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I can do great work. They don't even need to tell me what I need to do. I can go find things to do. I like, if you leave me for a day or so, I'll go find some things to do. And that type of opportunity just really told me that I have the skills to be able to do this at a high level. And that, whenever you don't need someone to direct your work every single day, or, you don't have a boss that's, have to come and tell you, well, hey, I need this and I need this. It's one of those, when you're driven in that way, that I felt like at that point I could be really successful in this.
So, how did your MBA shape your approach to leadership and operations?
Yeah, I think thinking about operations, it really gave a lot of information as far as sort of a Six Sigma approach to things, of how can you make things better. I think that's how I approach a lot of the operation always is, I know we're doing well, and it doesn't mean that we're not doing well, to look at your operation, but how can we do things just a little bit better so that we provide a better service, or we do it more efficiently, we save time, or there are processes we can combine. So I think the MBA from an operational aspect really helped me to take a look at how the operations runs, and being able to break that down and really understand, how do you look at improving operations and make things flow in a much better way. I think the MBA really helps you as far as leadership is concerned, because whenever you understand those management principles, those are the things that just really help you get an understanding and a grasp of how to lead people. You can't just always have a leader that's just dropped into a room and then, say, hey, go. You now have to lead everybody. I think there is a level of understanding that you do need to have of what does it mean to be a leader? How do you lead people? And also the big thing in leadership is, where are you trying to go?
Yes, sir. Let's transition through to your professional journey and your public sector foundations.
Yeah.
What was your first major role in public service, and what did it teach you?
Yeah, my first role within public service majorly was with Fulton County government, and with being in large organizations, I think some of the things I learned, and no knock to Fulton County and some of the larger organizations, but what I learned is that I didn't want to necessarily work in a humongous organization. The downside that you can have to working in places like a Fulton that are 5,000 employees is, they really want you to focus on the job you do. I think for me, that can be sometimes a little bit boring to be in one thing and not necessarily move about and do several different functions. But I think with being in large organizations, you're trying to keep the wheel spinning. So, you're a cog in that wheel, and they need you to really focus on being good at that thing you do. Was kind of my first major role being in that. But I think it was still a great experience and a great intro to being able to understand how government works and what comes with that.
So, just as you went from Fulton County to where you are now, can you tell us, and tell maybe some of the future people that may come to work under you? Tell us, how did that work, and how are you going to be able to help people to transcend into these positions? Because I know that public service is one that's really demanding, but you have to be meticulous.
Yeah, and I think with what I do currently, I do try to mentor a lot of people out in the field, whether they're in it and trying to progress, or when they're trying to break into it. So I do have quite a few friends that have moved throughout in different areas and various levels. And I think really with the understanding of getting in is, I tell people like this: get into public sector and really take the opportunity to just learn first. You might not walk into your ideal job necessarily upon entry, but there's always opportunity in public sector whenever you do get in and you get some experience, you build some connections, but really get in and start to understand what are the things that you do like, what are the things that you don't like about it, because you may be someone that wants to enter in procurement always. And you might get into procurement and you might not want to necessarily make that your career choice. But the great thing about being in public sector is even within your organization, there can be so many different opportunities that you need to understand what is it that I do like or don't like about my current field, and then getting an understanding of how I get to that place I do want to be. As you do climb the levels, because I do have 2 or 3 people that used to work for me that are city and county managers right now. And I think the big thing in kind of teaching them as a different aspect is how do you deal with pressure? How do you deal with pressure? How do you deal with people and elected officials, the pressure that brings to you? How do you stay calm and cool under that? Also understanding you don't have to have an answer immediately to every question. That is not your absolute responsibility. Your responsibility is to be able to understand how to get an answer to a question. So don't frustrate yourself with trying to come up with something just because somebody asked you a question. And so I think there's just so many aspects whenever you look at so many of these various roles that, when you're in, whether it be lower level staffer or whether you be at the top of the chart, is that you have to understand just some of these key aspects, learning how to deal with people, learning how to deal with pressure, learning how to meet deadlines is something else that's really important, because if you say you're going to do something and the citizens know this, they're expecting you to do it. So there's just those multitudes of things that when you walk in the door, you need to really take a second to think, is this for me? And can I do it? Because there is that public pressure. There are always open records, so people can request so many different things you've worked on. So just understanding, what to say, what not to say, when to say. And I think, I think some of those things, like I say, growing up with the elders and knowing that I did not have a speaking role whenever they were talking, is something that's important that does translate to now of, when do you need to be the person talking? When do you need to just sit there and listen and observe and take in whatever that information is? But I think it's a great opportunity out there for so many people out there to get into public service. And I'm always excited to help people get into public service or progress through the ranks of public service as much as I can.
Let me ask you this, because I know that there may be, a lot of these younger, up and coming young people, men and women, that want to get into public service,
Yeah.
and sometimes the mentality is a little bit different. How do you help them to tone whatever is happening that's not really professional, to really get into public service and to know what public service is?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, I think presentation standards of yourself are a little different now, sometimes with younger people than what it was when I was a little bit younger. Even the difference of nowadays for me versus back then is, you had to wear a tie for everything. Whenever I first got into the workforce, that was the minimum requirement versus I don't know anybody that wears ties very often on just a regular day. But I think as far as, especially young people getting in, it is really about how you do present yourself. And you have to present yourself from day one in the best light. I think, sometimes some of the younger people I've met at conferences make fun of me because I will go with, a jacket and sometimes a tie. And, they're thinking, well, why are you wearing all this stuff to come to this random conference and sit through? And I was like, well, there might be somebody I meet for the first time today. And, that's what they're going to remember is, how they saw me. They don't need to see me looking ragged or not professional. And I think some of those things, just presentation simply, is an important aspect for young people getting into the field that is very different than whenever I broke into the workforce some years ago. And I think even with people that are my age is, don't get yourself lax and think that just because, I'm dressed like this, that you've got it made. You have to also be able to articulate thoughts. You have to be able to control anger and frustrations. Like I think people say, fix your face. So you have to be able to really work through those things and just really be stone faced and keep yourself calm, whatever that age, because that could be a challenge, I think, for everybody to really sit there and get some bad news or hear something bad, and they, have a look, and those are things that people pick up on, whether it be your appearance or whether it be some of those nonverbal cues that I think everybody needs to really work on and think through to understand this is how somebody's viewing you. And if it's their first time viewing you, that's what they're taking away. There's not a second chance. So you really have to be on top of your game when it comes to just how people view you and how people think that you come across, or what they might believe you to be.
How did your experiences in Fulton County prepare you for your future leadership?
Yeah, I think with that, what I was doing in Fulton County was workforce development, and I had an opportunity to work with youth that were usually underprivileged. And I think really from there, I got a strong understanding of how you set an example. Again, being younger, my dad being in leadership and being around elders, they really understood how to set the example. So you saw, they showed you how they were going to do things. And I think really from that upbringing to them being at Fulton County, I understood with those youth that were in certain situations, I had to show them, that there's better out there, that they can do these things, that, yes, with a helping hand, you can get to a certain place. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect, but you have to have a starting point. And when you show people what's possible, then they might not have thought about that. And I think with Fulton County, that was something great that I had the opportunity to be able to do, is to really show people what's possible in your life and how you can do some things. And, if you're able to go and, you go from dropping out of school to getting your GED, that puts you at a different level. Go from that GED to getting your associates. That's a different level of eye-opening. And then maybe they go on and get to their 4-year degree, so on and so forth. The difference in what that meant as far as job prospects, but really showing people what those paths were, was something that was, I think, special for me at Fulton.
So why is giving back so important to you? Because I think when you're able, again, you're leading by example, but what makes that the important thing of giving back to pull somebody else forward?
Well, I think that's what people remember you for. You can have all the plaques in the world, and you can have all the awards, recognitions, all those things. But I think in some scenarios, to me at least, whenever you have sort of that tree of people that have come up behind you, that that can look and say, hey, Derrick helped me to get to X point. The hope is that you bring them up, and they turn around and they bring somebody up the ladder too. And whenever you keep on doing that, at a certain point, you've just built this huge tree of people that have all helped one another. And it's just a mindset, and it's just a community then of helpfulness that you're building, to where people aren't just thinking simply about themselves. They are first thinking about others, and they know that somebody had to help them get to a place. Now I need to make sure that I'm paying that forward to help somebody else get to the place they're trying to be. And I think that's just really important, just generally in life, is looking at how we can help people. So whether it be within my public service, whether it be through organizations like the fraternity, whether it be a board member with Swim Kids, of helping underprivileged youth be able to learn how to swim, being able to really help people. These are these things that I think people remember more so. It's not those gifts you give them. It's, being able to look back and say, you know what, if it wasn't for that helping hand that I got, I wouldn't have been able to get in that job. But without that helping hand, I wouldn't have been able to learn how to swim. I could have drowned if I didn't know how to do that. Without that helping hand from the fraternity, we wouldn't have got that community service that they provided for us. And I think as you just go down the line of that giving, that's just, I think, what I want to leave as a legacy, and what I want to be able to show to my kids as well.
What did you learn about community needs while working in Franklin County?
I think that we all are more similar than we are different. With being in Franklin County, it was me going from Lawrenceville, being in a major metro area, to being in a very rural area here in Georgia. And I think with learning what people need there's similar needs across everybody. I know sort of in our world today, we believe that, people over here need one thing and people over there need a completely different thing. And I think learning from that, the lesson would be that's not true whatsoever. We all are practically one and the same. We all have the same basic needs. We all desire those needs. And I think with being there, even though it was very similar to where I grew up in West Tennessee, so it wasn't just absolutely new to me. It was one of those things where understanding that, whether I help somebody in rural Georgia or whether I help somebody in metro Georgia, I'm still helping people. I'm still providing services. They still all have needs that are very similar. There might just be a dollar figure that's different associated to each of them. But I think with being there, it was one of those to where you just understand that they want the best for themselves and their families as well, just like anybody else out in the world. There's no difference in that. That's what they want. They're still just trying to figure out how to get there. And whenever you're in charge or in some type of leadership within those type of communities, especially there, they're looking to you because you're the kind of the top executive within the county. And they really are going to look to you for that guidance of how can we get better? What are the things that we do need without losing our community character?
How did your time in Lawrenceville shape your understanding of municipal operations?
Yeah, I think Lawrenceville was great for me. At that time we had a full service city, so they actually provided gas, electric, and water services. And I think it was a great opportunity with being in at that time because now you're touching every aspect of people's days. So you go home, of course, you have to have gas, electric, water. You still have all your basic services that were provided. And I think whenever I was there, it was just an opportunity to really understand the ins and outs of all forms of the government. When you have that many different services, you have that vast variety of people. Lawrenceville is a very diverse community. So I think with that, it was the opportunity to really understand, how to interact with people, how a government can really benefit everyone, and how you can be a part of that solution.
So, what leadership lessons did you carry from each city you served?
I think the biggest thing that I've carried every single place is that it's all about the people. I think just a fun thing, even for my current role in being City of Tucker, the staff gave me an award of the People's Champion. So it's one of those to where when you think about the people first and how you can help the people first, no matter where you go, you're going to find the solutions. The solutions are out there already. But when you really put people first, when you look at focusing on how you can help them, that's just the key whenever you're going into any of these municipalities or whatever the area is, whether it be large, small, rural, metro. Think about people first. Think about how you can help them. And that's usually been the biggest takeaway for me every place.
So, what does result-oriented leadership mean to you?
I think, it's kind of like something at a conference I was at, local government gets things done. And I think for myself, it's important getting things done. You can talk all you want to talk about how you can do things or what you would do. But I think at the end of the day, people want to see results. So I think really having measurable results, whether it be a project, so whether it be a road project, a dam project, any other type of capital project, people want to know that the money that they're putting in your hands to get this project done, you are delivering. And I think getting those type of results or making sure that, if you come in with a philosophy of we want our operations to be more efficient, find the way to be more efficient and get that done and have a measurable result to show that, we sped up a process by 2 days. So I know, for instance, being at Franklin County, getting things done, they were still working off a lot of paper at that particular time. So we had paper time sheets when I first got there. So we were processing 174 time sheets at that time every 2 weeks. And it probably took about 4 days to get payroll done. But I really came forward with that to let everybody on staff know and let the community know we wanted to do this in a more efficient manner. We don't want to take 4 days every 2 weeks to do payroll. That's wildly inefficient. That's 8 days out of a month. So I mean, that's 8 working days out of a 20-day working day month. That's a little bit tough. So we really wanted to have some goals. And I think a big goal with that was to get it more efficient. So I implemented a system and had to carry that load mostly myself, just because my payroll person had quit whenever we realized we had the amount of work we had to do. But I carried that while still processing payroll to get us to a digital system that they still have today, to where we could basically process payroll in about a half day. So whenever you get into that kind of point, that's something very measurable that you can show. We're not just spending money to say that we're spending money and trying something. I'm showing you an absolute result. We went from 4 days processing to a half day to about a day. I'll give it even up to a day, but still, that's considerable. When you talk about being 8 days out of a month to going down to 2 days.
So, how do you approach problem solving in complex government environments?
I think you have to really know your team. I think that having a good team around you is your first step, is really hiring good people that understand their positions and their backgrounds. But I think from there is understanding how to solicit the right kind of advice from them whenever you get into some of those more complex problems, because it could be a problem that involves multiple departments. And so whenever you have that be the case, you need to hear from multiple people on how they would solve it. But once you've heard from people, how does that mesh together? So you have to be the glue. You have to be the person that's going to take those individual solutions and make that into a solution that puts all those pieces together and comes up with one final total solution that's going to solve your problem. I think you have to really look at complex problem solving from the aspect. You have to take chances, I think, and sometimes in government. I think that it's okay to mess up. It's okay to be wrong. Of course, you want to get the best information you can and you want to make the best decision. But I think you can't be scared to make a decision and really look at what those options are and use your best judgment on how to do that. So I think when you're looking at that type of problem solving in municipal government, it's not about being right every single aspect of the way. It's about really coming up with the best solution that's going to work and not being afraid to really put yourself out there and come up with some creative solutions even, because it's okay to ask for some level of forgiveness. Now, of course, you don't want to spend $1 million and you lose $1 million. We're not saying go through and be reckless. But whenever you are looking at those solutions, finding things that can work and be the most benefit to the community, and just understanding that if you do mess up or you get things wrong, understanding that you take ownership of those and then you move forward.
Now, as you say that, because I definitely understand where you're going when you say that, but let's think about this for a second, because I mean, I know that when you're working for the government, it doesn't matter if it's local, county, city, state, or federal. Mm-hmm. Is that there's just a lot of little tedious things that go by that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
How do you get your people really prepared for, let's say, the situation where maybe a step or two may have been missed? And, some people are just harder on themselves than others. How do you get them to that comfort of knowing that, okay, this is what happened, you understand, you want to move on? How do you get them to feel better about that?
Yeah, and I think what I've always taught within all of my staff is publicly, I'm going to fall on the sword. We never criticize staff in public. If staff did make a mistake, I messed up, then it's me that messed up. Now, when we get behind closed doors, I'll talk to them. We'll work through that, but I always tell staff, I'm not worried about you making a mistake necessarily. If you do make a mistake, I want to know as soon as possible so we can try to correct whatever we're doing. But I want them to really understand that, ask yourself these certain lines of questions every time you're going through a process. Ask yourself the questions that you believe either a council or an elected member or a citizen or another peer would ask you whenever you're going through these, and ask yourself those questions so that way you're really trying to address as much as you can. Now, of course, you can't ask yourself every possible question that's out there, but also don't hamstring yourself by not moving forward and being afraid of failure that you're not going to do something. Again, as long as we're not getting to something catastrophic, I can live with that all day, every day. And I tell people, because I've had employees that have come to me crying, saying they've messed up something, and like I told them, well, what were you trying to do? Were you giving your best effort in trying to do that and not being reckless? Okay, fine, not a problem. I'll figure out some solution to let them know we need to prolong this process just a little bit, and we need to clean up some things. Perfectly fine, not an issue. But I want them to understand that they're the CEOs of their areas. I can't walk into every area and just simply make a decision with limited knowledge. I am familiar with every department and every aspect that we do operate, but I'm not in those day to day in that type of way that I could just open up their computer and say, oh, well, here's the obvious solution. You're the CEO of your department or your area of responsibility. So I'm relying on you to be able to go through and do all the due diligence needed, make the best decision, and come with a recommendation. Now, if it's getting kind of tricky and it's very complex, I'm happy to jump in at that point, and we can pull in whomever we need to pull in to be able to help come up with that solution. But if it's just day to day, this is all you. This is yours, and you have discretion to be able to call for help whenever you need help.
So what misconceptions do people often have about local government work?
I think sometimes the misconception can be that they're lazy, or that they're just wasting taxpayer money. It's one of those to where you could think that you're paying more taxes than what you might actually be paying for those services. Typically, a lot of these services actually cost more money than what we pull in for certain services, especially if it's residential related. So I think those can be some big misconceptions, and those aren't things that you really ever go through and correct people on necessarily, but just getting an understanding that, to whomever has those misconceptions, we're doing the best we can for you. We want to provide a high level of service. We don't want to just simply give you some mediocre level or low level of service just because you're paying low taxes. We still want to give you the same high level of service no matter what your tax figure is. And I think there can be sometimes misconceptions that government people don't care, but I would say people strongly do care about their jobs. They're very passionate about that. They want to own their jobs. They want to do the best they can for everybody out there within their roles to really get things done and make that impact. Everybody that's getting into government service, we have to remember, is getting into it because they want to help somebody. And, whenever at the end of the day, they're helping somebody, they feel good about their job and they want to do the best they can to deliver that product.
So how do you balance policy, operations, and community expectations? Because in asking that question, I know that this is more so with dealing not just with the community, but with people sometimes personally, that come to your office. Yeah. How do you deal with those situations? How do you balance that?
I think there has to be, I think you kind of start with expectations. I think that's really the reality setter. Because there could be a lot of different expectations, especially within local government. Because if I came from Washington D.C. and then I moved to rural Georgia, well, there's a difference in expectation of what I've seen as far as what the local government does for me. And I've had some of those to where even when I was at Franklin County, I had a gentleman that was coming from, I believe, Pittsburgh. So he went from Pittsburgh to coming to Franklin County to being in a small area. And, it's just a different level of service that's going to be provided there. And I think when you're looking at the policies have to fit not only what the people do want, but what you're able to provide. And I think that does come a lot from the type of municipality you're in. Because if you're in those major metro areas, of course, you have the resources to be able to do a lot more things. it's very easy. But when you are in some of the more rural areas, you don't have those resources. So you can't just say that we're going to, either turn around something in a day, because there might be one person that processes that also does 2 or 3 other functions. And I think it's really about setting those expectations when someone comes to your office or somebody calls you on the phone to say, I understand that you came from Miami, and I know that they did it a certain way, but we're not Miami, and we can't do it that way. But we do want to do the best we can for you. But it's just going to take us a little bit longer to do that. And I think as long as you're very upfront with setting expectations in all of those situations, I think that people usually do understand that they might not be happy. It might not be the answer they're looking for, but I think people can really appreciate when you are giving them an honest and straightforward answer about what realistically can happen.
So, what role does humility play in public service?
I think it plays a very hefty role. Arrogance doesn't get you anywhere. Wanting to be in the spotlight doesn't get you anywhere. My belief, and that's just my belief, is that it's best for us to work in quiet, boring government. It's not the sexy thing to be out there and be in the newspaper every day or be on TV every day, but at the end of the day, people want that result. So as long as we're operating, we're doing the things we're supposed to do. I don't need any fanfare for any of those things. It's just like even being in council meetings, I would tell my boss, I don't want any credit for anything. And I'm fine with that. You can give the credit to the staff. I'm accomplished. I'm okay. I want them to be able to elevate and be recognized more so than myself. But I think whenever you are a little bit arrogant, that's when people start putting a target on your back, because then now you believe you're bigger than the system, you're bigger than the things that we're trying to accomplish. And it can be very difficult when it's going to come a day where you do maybe make a mistake, or you say something wrong, or you mess up, and all of a sudden, all the people that were clapping for you when you were on the newspaper, when you were on TV, they're looking at you, with daggers, and they have been waiting for this moment. So
Yes.
I do believe you have to just really have a level of humility and just go in, just focus on doing your job. The accolades can always come whenever you're just simply getting the work done.
I think, again, this is what makes you such a distinguished leader, because I think when people are able to be humble, as it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing in life, it's from leadership to whatever you're doing, it's the humility that makes the difference, because that's what makes you the real person.
Yeah.
So when you think about that and you think about your leadership style and you as a leader, what kind of example are you setting, or do you want to set for people to understand?
Yeah, I think with my leadership style and how I approach it is, I want to see everybody succeed. That is number one goal. However, we got to get there, whatever your skill level is. I'm happy to train. I'm happy to teach you whatever we need to teach you. If I need to call other cities to help teach you, I've done that. Whatever it's going to take for us to get people in the best position to be successful are the things I want. I want them to really think about almost standing on my shoulders. I don't want them to fight to get to tread water. Let's stand on my shoulders. Let's get you above water. Let's really get you where you need to be, an understanding of your job. Let's get you operating at a high level. Let's get you the training that you need. I don't think it's been too many times I've ever said to somebody when they've requested to go up to a training from me that I say, no, we don't want to do that. Now maybe if they're asking to go across country and it's an expensive trip, okay, or international trip, okay, maybe that. But as far as just regular training and things that they can do that are local, that are cost efficient and aren't glaring to where they're irresponsible, there's not going to be a time that I'm going to say no to that. So I think really putting people first in that way to get them to their goals. Usually as I meet with staff, I want to understand what their goals are. And I tell them, well, if that's what your goal is, this is how you can get there. If you want to do that, I can help you get there. But we're going to have to focus on these things and get these things done. And I think really as you walk in as a leader, when you're putting those people first and really making the effort to really show them that you care about them, you care about their goals.